everyone, welcome to Movement and Me, an initiative that is designed for budding artists across the world who wish to pursue their career in art. I'm your host Niharika, and on this show you will hear artists talk about their lives and the choices they had to make in pursuit of arts. We will also get to use some tips and key learnings from the lives of these artists, along with a detailed discussion on their areas of interest. So quickly hop onto a journey into the world of arts along with us. On that note, I have a very interesting question for you, which I have been holding on to for a while now. Tell us a little bit about Nova Dance. Why did you start it? Where did it start from? And what is so interesting about Nova Dance? Because I have seen some of the performances, but I would like for you to take the stage and talk a little bit about them.
So I started Nova Dance in 2008. And really one of the reasons was, I mentioned it earlier, Toronto is one of the most multicultural cities in the world. And yet, I told you about, growing up and being in all these places where dancers were celebrating life. And so I was seeing, all sorts of exciting folk art forms, other classical forms. And yet when I got to the dance world or the dance community, I wasn't seeing any of those people. And in the same way, I was self-generating a lot of projects, and some people were hiring me as a dancer, but still there wasn't a place in this city where a dancer like me could get a job. And, there were, companies, there were ballet companies or contemporary dance companies where dancers were on salary and had benefits and were being given training as part of their employment. And that just didn't exist for somebody who had training in Bhattacharya or in street dance or in Filipino folk dance or in, Japanese buto, all those kinds of things. There just wasn't a place. And it seemed to me that there should be. And so that was why I started it. And then it really has been this evolution. Like, it started in 2008, and it's only now in 2020 that the organization has some secure, stable funding from municipal, provincial, and federal funding bodies. And lately, since the pandemic, as we've been gathering online and working, I was saying to the dancers that, like, this is an experiment. Trying to take a creation process online, that's an experiment. And also, it's been an experiment in having a dance company, because it's also a dance company that doesn't have a physical space. So that moment of the pandemic suddenly was like, okay, we're actually in a good position because we don't have a physical space that we have to maintain and worry about. And how can we take advantage of what the moment is offering us to figure out what it means to be a company right now? And it's always been intended as a place for diversity. And when I first got enough funding to hire dancers other than myself, I started doing these creation labs where I brought in, yes, Bharatanatyam dancers, and also I had dancers who trained in ballroom, who trained in ballet, who trained in modern dance. And it was really this idea of, like, okay, we're dancers. We should be able to communicate with each other. We should be able to create something that an audience responds to, even if our technical training is from different places. That if I, as a choreographer, could give the artists prompts and ideas to follow, that, again, even though there was a diversity of training, that we could find a way to create cohesive, communicative, accessible work for an audience. And so over the years, there's been a couple of different initiatives. So there's been those kinds of creation labs where I select the dancers who I want to work with. we also started doing an intensive once a year called the Deep End Weekend, where on the first day I had speakers, multidisciplinary, multicultural, multi-generational, talking about a life in the arts, because it seemed to me that there were so many people training in Indian classical dance styles, and yet very few were actually taking it on as a profession. So I was trying to provide an inspiration point of like, yeah, this is a possible thing. And then the second day of that initiative, choreographers, directors, musical artists all again come together. We pick our names out of a hat, people go into teams, and they have the day to create a work that gets presented at the end. And that too, it was like, there's been a lot of symposiums in Canada where dancers working in different forms come together, but then they all turn into talking head symposiums, and the opportunity to actually collaborate wasn't happening. So that was the impetus for that. And that event, like, it started in 2016 and has just continued to sort of bring more and more artists, and collaborations have grown out of those weekends, and dancers have gotten employment out of those weekends. So so that's an important part. We do conversation series with artists working from different disciplines, and again, different cultural backgrounds. And I think I keep saying it's still an experiment because we're still evolving it, and we're still trying to say, I'm doing this thing right now. We put the dancers actually on employment contracts instead of being freelancers. So that long ago dream of when will there be a job, there is actually a job now. And then in that contract, the hours that the dancers are offered, they're doing studio hours as well as office hours. And the office hours are things like just meeting and having discussions about the artists that we're programming, or meeting and discussing things like guru trauma, or what's happening in the community, or I created a writer in residence program this year that Gitanjali Kolanad and Branavi Jayasundaram, a younger artist. So Gitanjali was mentoring Branavi in writing that she was doing. So yeah, there's a lot of multitasking that goes on. It's all about the art form of dance and keeping people connected to the power and vitality of the art form, and creating a pool of artists who are energized and creatively engaged, and see the potential for them to pursue their own choreographic ideas, or to be inside my choreography, or to be inside the choreography of other artists. And yeah, like Nova Dance is a home for dancers. It tries to provide a sense of stability and an anchor for independent artists, and it tries to create a really rich core of artists who are engaged in what the company does and how the company moves forward.
You're actually doing a lot of work. That's what I'm gathering from all of this. But something that I really have immense respect for is you trying to convert the idea of hiring dancers not as freelancers, but as full-time employees, or having an employment contract. uh, because like between art as a hobby and art as a profession, that's essentially what is the difference. Because you need to have a contract, you need to be paid for everything that you work towards, be it meetings, be it just collaborative discussions, because even those in the end contribute to whatever it is that you're presenting or you're creating. And sometimes I think somehow we as artists, because we have to present this perfect image of our performances, of our choreographies, about what we have achieved, we seem to forget that there's a lot of hard work and collaboration and discussion that goes in the background, which then does not get enough credit, which makes it as which sort of gives this assumption that artists don't necessarily put in a lot of work and they just come on stage and dance and go away, which is not the case. You and I know
Yeah.
about this. So that is actually quite interesting. So based on that, I actually want to know what you feel, and because you have been trying to push this out as well, why do you think it's important for artists to have these employment contracts? What do you think it does for an artist, and how does it help an artist to create performance, create choreographies, or maybe explore more and put in more effort and time into their art and their own sort of time and effort into whatever it is that they produce. So, how important is it for an artist to have these employment contracts?
Well, I think it's absolutely vital. The there's a lot of discourse right now in general about the changing role of the artist, and also but precisely this, like the economy of it, like somewhere along the way, the romantic notion of the starving artist, and the romantic notion that we should just be so pure in our ideals and it should only be about the art and not be about commerce, and then the reality of living in this world, and what does it mean. And I'm always taken, I remember reading a story about our early ancestors when we were still living in caves, and the anthropologists finding the cave with the very elaborate mural, and really understanding that this artist didn't have to go on the hunt. This artist was allowed to be somebody in that community who was working on this mural while the other people did the things that sustained their ability to work on that mural. And or even stories of royal patronage. Art, in order to function in today's society, the artist needs to be able to eat, the artist needs to be able to pay their rent, the artist needs to be able to know. So anyway, for art to be strong, the artist has to be strong. For the artist to be strong, they have to be able to have some stability and some consistency, and to know that their art is valued, that it isn't just being seen as, oh, that's something pretty, or that's well, I mean, right now in the pandemic, so many discussions about, is art an essential service? And on one hand, it's like, oh, if it wasn't for everything that's happening online, for digital performances, or all the streaming services that are offering things for people to occupy their minds other than news, all these artistic avenues for people to find a way not to lose hope right now, like all those things are essential. And just like healthcare is essential, art is essential. And so I've always very passionately believed in that. And one of the reasons of switching from freelance to employment contract, I also felt it was very important, as proven by the pandemic, that as governments were rolling out supports for various industries, if you have an industry that's entirely populated by freelancers, it's very difficult to get the resources to those individuals. Whereas organizations that do have artists on payroll were able to access certain supports to be able to keep those artists employed. So it really felt important that by putting the dancers on employment contract, it sends a larger message that yes, dance is a job, dance is a profession. This is something that we need to take care of during these times. So, and especially also because in certain cultural practices, because there are also these very important values of commitment to your guru, and taking care of your guru as well, and all those things are important to somehow formalize, so that they don't just become maybes, or we don't forget about them. And so to find ways to keep the the pulse of the dancer strong is really important.
There's something very interesting you said. You phrased it, which I found very interesting, and I want to reiterate it because that's how powerful it is. Dance is a job today. Today, in the world that we are living in, dance is definitely a job, because at the end of the day, you're still trying to, you have to try to earn a living through it. If you're someone who's interested in dance and you're trying to pursue it, it must be converted into a profession. So thank you so much for putting it out there for everybody to listen and sort of, respond to, and take some time to let it sink in. We don't necessarily, particularly in India, even today, we don't necessarily look at dance, or even arts for that matter, as a profession. We take it as a hobby, and hence a lot of times we hear different people, and even parents for that matter, whose children are interested in arts, ask the question, but how are you going to earn the living? Where is the money going to come from? Are you going to be able to survive on just dancing for the rest of your life? And these are very important questions, which make us then wonder, why is dance not converted into a profession already? What's the issue? So I think these are questions and things that we need to start thinking about moving forward, because of the kind of world that we are living in, and we can't ignore these very important points. So thank you very much for putting it out there. I have a slightly disconnected question that I want to ask you next, but it's something that that has been at the top of my head as well. Uh, so I saw one of your performances. I couldn't see the whole thing because, of course, there was snippets of it available on your website. There's a performance called Infinite Storms, wherein you and five other dancers did a performance based on how your body reacts to the migraine issue that you have. Why did you think of doing such a performance in the first place? And how important do you think it is for us as dancers, as people who are currently only presenting their perfect selves or their best selves on the screen, to discuss and talk about the physical and the mental ailments that we may or may not have experienced, or others are experiencing around us? Because somewhere we also have the ability and the opportunity to voice them out in different ways. So how important do you think that is, and why did you feel the need to do a piece on how your body responds to migraine?
So for many years, other people had been saying to me, oh, you should do a piece about migraines. And I would laugh at them, I would ignore them, I would say to them, why on earth would I want to make a piece about something that's so painful? Why would I want to subject audiences to that? The reason people would say I should make a piece is because I would have very imaginative and descriptive ways of explaining what the migraine was doing. And like, I had a dance collaborator, and when we were working together, I was frequently under the influence of a migraine, and I would say things. I'd be like, "Oh, it's like all my bones have just turned into glass, and they're shattered on the inside of my body," or it feels like there's a swarm of bees just buzzing inside my head, and various other things. Or then I would start to develop these coping mechanisms of like, okay, it feels like there's a swarm of bees inside my head. So how can I get the queen bee out of my head so all the other bees will leave? And, just to transform the image of pain into something that was pleasurable. And that was a coping mechanism. So people kept saying to me that I should do it. And I didn't think that I wanted to go there. And I was very nervous to take something that was so personal and to make art out of it. And would it become too self-indulgent, or would it seem like, I don't know. It was a very difficult decision to make. I encountered a few different artists who were working with personal physical constraints and how they were bringing that into their art. And at some point, the switch kind of flipped in my head of realizing that because of my condition, I had a window onto many aspects of the human experience, because the things that a migraine sufferer feels have a lot in common with somebody who has insomnia, somebody who has depression. There were just a whole bunch of things that were like, yeah, any kind of ongoing existence as a human will have these elements in them. And I realized that as an artist, it was my job to give a voice to these experiences through my art. So once I made that choice, it became easier to go there in the studio. But even then, I was very, I didn't want a piece where everyone was just walking around holding their heads for 50 minutes, right? And then also, as that work evolved, although the inspiration point was migraine, and I used the different phases of a migraine for each of the sections of the work, or the dancers improvised movement vocabulary based on words from a pain questionnaire. So piercing, throbbing, pounding, and they used those to create movement that wasn't necessarily about a headache. It was about those words and what their responses were to those words. And in the end, I think the work is more powerful as a metaphor than as a literal experience of a migraine. The metaphor of what happens to somebody who is isolated and how community comes together to hold that person up and to go on a journey together, that was more what that work ended up being about. And yes, it was also inspired by a specific medical condition. So the range of responses to the work was very interesting. People who had migraines responded to it in one way. People who have people in their lives with migraines also said they came out of it with a new understanding. And then people who have no connection to migraines at all were able to see a work where 3 women of color and 2 Caucasian women were in this place of bringing different dance languages and different ideas together and working together to communicate one journey.
Okay, so that's a lot of information. There's definitely diversity in your performance, that is clear. And I think you indirectly pointed out the reason and the purpose of doing a performance, and whether or not it's important for us dancers to express our physical and mental ailments. Because one of the things that you mentioned right at the end of the answer is that it kind of gave a new perspective to the people who were experiencing migraine and to the ones who had people around them with the ailment. But you also talk about the people who did not have migraine as an issue, get an understanding of how the body responds, as well as look at how different kinds of movement practices can be brought together under one umbrella, under one topic, to create a piece that is universally understood and experienced and acknowledged by all, where dance language per se does not have any bar. So yes, that was very interesting. That's what I picked up as well as an answer. So thank you so much for that. Before, so we are kind of nearing the end. So I have 2 more questions for you. One is about your performance, which you have recently started working on, Svaha. So can you tell us a little bit about what the performance is based on and what was your inspiration behind that performance? I have read and watched the video, but I don't want to talk about it. So a little bit of.
Well, here we are in 2020 at a time when most of us are being told not to gather. And Svaha was inspired by the act of gathering. And it really, the work as I see it in my mind is a contemporary dance work. It is abstract, it has movement that will bring meaning to. It doesn't exist yet, so it's a lot of ideas. And I knew I wanted to create, so in 2016, I had created Infinite Storms, which was a work with 5 dancers. And I had previously made a work for Toronto Dance Theatre, which had 9 dancers. So I've always been trying to get to a larger ensemble work. And I wanted to make a work that had at least 15 dancers. And then as I was thinking about that, and I was also thinking about how many dancers there are in Canada who have trained in all these Indian classical dance forms, that what started in my mind originally was going to be all Bharatanatyam dancers. I blew my process out by having Odissi and Kathak dancers come into the first process, because I was like, there's these underlying principles that I'm working with, which is, the heartbeat and rhythm, bringing meaning to movement, being able to understand the abstraction of human emotion through the Navarasa. All those kinds of things. I was like, okay, I don't need to limit myself to Bharatanatyam dancers. There's a whole spectrum of artists available. And then the more I was thinking about that, and the more I was thinking about large scale performance, I thought to myself, well, I also have to limit myself to only 15 dancers, because some of what I want to do is really about, dancers finding some together and finding moments of connect. So I came up with this idea of having a body choir, where I thought, I know I'll only be able to pay 15 dancers for an extensive in-depth creation period, but there's so many other dancers that even with some short, intense bursts, they could be choreographed in a way that they're like moving the space on stage just by being like this huge bank of bodies. And knowing that an audience, watching multiple bodies in space doing things in unison or in canon is a compelling visual. So I just came up with this idea of the body choir, and the idea was that in a city like Toronto, it wouldn't be hard to get an additional 75 dancers to be a part of this huge event. And that also, as the work traveled to different cities, that it would be a lot of work, and it would be a fantastic challenge to create the body choir in each city that the work went to. So prior to the pandemic, the plans for the work, there was a show in Toronto, and we were also working in Vancouver to put the work there. So that's the work that was happening, to create these body choirs of not only dancers, but also musicians from community to come and be a part of like of a larger experience like this. So So it's a large ensemble group work with Nova dance technique of improvisation and also connected intersection with rhythm, and also a lot of the things that that we do in our practice that don't necessarily make it into performance. So, Kathak dancers, yes, they do recitation in their work, but Bharatanatyam and Odissi dancers, to be reciting and to know that that's going to be performed on stage, that was a big leap. And, that my music composer keeps saying, they're going to have to practice. They're going to have to practice. I'm like, I know. We have to practice it the same way we have to practice the steps. And also, just like it really, Svaha is about dance. It's about dance, and it's about connecting dance to the earth, and it's about connecting dance to a sense of shared experience, and how rituals of gathering bring communities together. And also the work is featuring all women. I really feel that the role that women play in building community is so important. So a lot of metaphors woven into a dance work and one of the interesting things that happened in the process of making the work is that it became a metaphor for itself, because the way that we started auditioning for dancers across the country, the way that dancers from different schools, from different techniques were coming into the same room and having experiences together and being able to connect. Just it made it something that was larger than the original vision for just a dance piece.
That's actually quite a bit of work, and I'm actually very interested to see what gets produced at the end of it, because uh, whatever glimpses I saw in terms of the video that was compiled, it looked very interesting, and it did have quite a bit of elements that you've talked about just now. So I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, you will see it soon in 2021. Uh, and hopefully we'll all be able to gather. That is the most important bit. On that note, I would like to ask you for the one final question, which is, do you have anything that you would like to tell our dance enthusiasts who are looking forward to pursuing dance in the future? Anything that you would like to add in terms of your experience or your feedback, or any guidance that you would like to give them?
I I have no doubt in my mind that dance is going to be so essential to lead us through this historic time in our lives. The function of dance in society, the way it takes human labor and transforms it into expressions of joy or expressions of heartbreak, the way that dance communicates. And also, right now, like the whole world is becoming so much more aware of the body and what it means to take care and what it means to be physically distanced, and all those sort of things I think are going to make dance just so much more connected to community and to the healing process that society is going to have to go through. Yes, there's a vaccine, but we've spent an entire year turning away from each other. We've spent, all the new fears have gotten wired into our nervous system. So how are we going to unlearn those things? How are we going to find ways to really connect to our heart and our mind so that we can make the world a better place? So I think dance is just so important. So therefore, anybody who's considering entering dance, yes, we need you. We need more dancers in the world. Dance makes the world a better place. And the one other thing I would say is that it's really important, I think, as dancers, for us to hold on to the things that we have in common, the things that all dancers are trying to do, that all dance forms have at their heart, this connection to other humans, the arousing of the imagination to dream of the future, to be more than our daily lives. We can only do that if we have common ground and we work together to support each other and to support the art form. We're better together.
Thank you so much for those words. And I think I would love to leave this at this point, because this is a very powerful message for everybody. Dancers, we're looking to build a community across the world. That's our aim, that's our vision. We've been working in silos for a very long time. And this is what, Noah, you were mentioning at the beginning of our interview as well, that, even today when we are under COVID and we are all secluded in our spaces, although a lot is happening online, we are still working in our respective silos. That kind of interaction, engagement that is required is still, happen. It's still very slow and it's very early in its stages. So dancers out there who are enthusiasts, who are interested in dance, please do something about it. Like we all are trying our best to. On that
Yes, absolutely.
On that note, thank you so much, Nova, for being part of this interview. And I've learned so much about your work, everything that you've done, and what you believe in, and what you think is important for all us dancers to keep in mind. Also, for anybody who is really interested in what Nova's work looks like, her Nova Dance Company website link is going to be provided to you in the description box below. Please click on it, explore all of her artwork. You will also find information on the different artists who are working closely with the company and who have been employed by Nova herself. So go take a look, explore, and feel free to write to her based on whatever information is available on her website, which is, by the way,
Absolutely.
so you'll find her email ID as well. So go take a look, write to her, find collaborative ways. This is how we learn. This is how we grow as a community. We have to build this sense of understanding and awareness and awe towards each other and our work. Everything matters today. Thank you, Noah. Any last words that you would like to add?
Thank you, Niharika. And I think the last words I would add is, congratulations and thank you for starting this initiative, because it just takes one person to start the conversation, and then, it just snowballs from there. That's a very Canadian term. We have snow here right now. I think it's a really wonderful thing that you're doing. I look forward to hearing, your other guests that you're going to be talking to. And I think that the future is bright with people like you in it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Those are very kind words from your end. But yeah, thank you so much.
Keep dancing.
Absolutely. Thank you all for tuning into Movement and Me, an initiative that is designed for budding artists across the world. To continue receiving notifications on our latest episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel Natya Mandalam or look us up on Apple Podcasts or Spotify for more information. I'm your host Niharika, and I'll see you all next time.